Howdy, ESSM 406. In this lecture, I want to give you a little bit of background on Rothman's approaches to community intervention. It's actually, in some sense, the core reading for this unit because it talks about different kinds of strategies, very broad different kinds of strategies that can be used to affect change. Rothman came up with this typology when he was working as a social worker, researcher, and professor in the 1960s and early 70s, and he applied this for many years, became very famous in the field of social work. And then actually the essay I'm having you reading is almost 30 years later, and he's actually reflecting back on the different approaches. And he says, well, I said that there's these three approaches, but often it's not just that one approach is used, but a campaign or a strategy involves multiple approaches, mixtures of them. So it's not that these are like you either do one or the other. And I should tell you that although this work is very well known in social work, it's not well known outside of that. But I find the typology that he gives very useful for thinking about the different kinds of actions that you or other people might take to affect change. The first approach that he talks about is what he calls locality development. And locality development means largely people working often within their own communities or within communities that they're going to work in to make change at a very local level. So a classic example of locality development, some of you may go on a spring break trip where you go to some poor area, maybe somewhere in the United States or maybe somewhere in Latin America. Often students go there, and you're going to help build a school or help repair roads or teach the kids English or something like that. You're engaging in locality development. And locality development might also be getting people together and organizing them to talk about their problems. It might even involve a little bit of, well, we're going to go talk to our elected representatives to ask for more support. That's locality development. It's a very non-confrontational approach to making change, and it's often a very effective approach. Some of you may be working on environmental policy problems where just getting the people to work together, and remember, we read a lot of readings in the last unit about how communities really can work together and solve a lot of their environmental problems on their own. Just getting those people to work together might be the solution. So that's pretty good. But then the second solution second strategy he gives, I should say, is called what he calls social planning or policy. Now, social planning or policy means experts are going to sit around in a room and make a decision about what should be done. And those experts might be elected officials, they might be academics like me, they might be community leaders, and they're going to make a plan for fixing the problems in the community or in the society. And this is how a lot of environmental decision making is done, in fact. And you can think a classic example of a social planning or policy approach in the environmental field would be what happens when we have an endangered species that's going to be listed. We have a bunch of biologists who sit around in a room and they say, well, these are the requirements of the endangered species, this is its habitat, and we're going to engage in a social planning process. They may not call it a social planning process, but they're going to produce a bunch of government documents that are going to say, well, these are the regulations about interacting with this endangered species. The final approach he gives is called what he calls social action. And social action is more confrontational. It might, in locality development, we might organize the local people to work together. In social action, we're going to organize the local people to have a protest or to all write to their legislators, and they're going to demand a change. So they might write to their legislators and say, we demand that this polluting facility be located somewhere else, not in our community. Or we might demand that the government regulate this or not regulate that. That's engaging in social action. And of course, this happens all the time in environmental policy. Now, just a warning about applying the ideas from this reading, which I really want you to do. It's a core reading. But if you write your essay and you say, well, I think that people should engage in social action, Okay, tell me what the social action is. Are they going to write to their legislators? Are they going to hold a protest? Are they going to raise money? And what exactly are they going to do? These are very general terms. So a few times in the past, I've had students write an essay where they say, well, I think we should have locality development. Well, what should the people do in that locality development? You have to be specific. But you can apply these ideas very well to any problem. And really, if you think about it, all the other things I'm going to talk about in this unit can be related back as one of these three types.